Hey, a snowy end of winter culminator day here in Newark, New Jersey. And I'm speaking to Matt Palumbo, who I learned for the first time is scant miles away from me. Is it snowing out your window too, Matt?
Yeah, it's been it hasn't really been sticking, doesn't look like, but it's been flurrying pretty much, all day consistently. And I think I can get out though, so that's good.
You mean snow?
I'm not trapped basically, so it's fine.
Well, we had some, it's been a couple of years since we've had that real new, hills of Essex and Morris County kind of snows where, you can really have some adventures.
There was that one year where they didn't salt, and then it was a disaster. And then now, anytime there's any sort of snow, whatever, they kind of go overboard, so you can get around, which is nice. But yeah.
So Matt, once again, you guys haven't heard me say this for a while. And of course, by the time you hear this, it'll be truly beautiful, I'm sure, warm springtime officially. But we're recording this in second week of March. Matt is one of those guys who he and I have interacted for years together on Twitter, and we've never had the chance to meet each other. And here it's even less excusable because we're really practically neighbors, especially because until my fairly recent move to Newark, I was in Roseland. And in any event, it's good to have a Jersey guy here on with me. We're going to talk about some very, very depressing stuff today, though. And in fact, Matt was so kind to send me his book beforehand, and I'm going to share with the world a quick shot of the topic of that book, and they're going to understand why I couldn't bear to open it. I mean, I find this subject, the subject of George Soros, so depressing on so many levels. And I'm sure you're going to make me feel even worse by the time we're done, but let's see, maybe we'll come up with a silver lining. Let's, the putative theme of the podcast. I don't think I've actually ever said this during an episode. If I have, it's only been fairly recently. So I've asked people in the past to come on, and they say, well, what's the podcast about? And before I tell them it's about free speech and cancel culture, and I have to stop myself from saying, I'm Ron Coleman. It doesn't have to be about anything. It's about Ron Coleman and what he thinks of things. But I'm not going to, I don't say that. So I always have to try to find a way, even though it really ends up being about just a conversation between me and some of the most interesting people who are some of the most interesting people who are willing to come onto the show.
That are willing.
I do try to jam it a little bit into the topical concept. The thing about Soros is I don't hear a lot about his direct involvement in the massive censorship movement that has swept the country and social media in the last couple of years. And I'm not asking you to necessarily address that at this point, because I'd rather actually start with the more basic stuff. But am I correct in assuming that his fingers are in that every bit as much as they're in everything else?
I mean, I don't cover that in the book specifically, but I mean, everything he funds is of the same vein as that. They're all cut from the same ideological cloth. And we are sort of seeing, in the Biden era, which, Soros has various various people who work for Soros-related NGOs or boards are in the Biden White House. I mean, Ron Klain is among them, Neera Tanden, Anthony Blinken is linked to Soros, and I have a big section in the book on that. And they're all, or the administration collectively has tried to sort of do a new form of censorship. We're always complaining about, big tech censorship, and we're obviously talking about it as a cultural value that we're against censorship, but they, of course, make it literal and go, well, as long as it's not the government, it's okay. And the government is now trying to, basically pressure big tech companies into doing their censorship. And there's a story out recently that basically the Biden administration was paying I think 100 different media companies to spread vaccine information. And whether or not you're pro or anti, it's just notable the administration is doing that. They very much pressure big tech companies across the board to censor. When Trump got kicked off of Twitter, Psaki was the first to go out there and go, well, hey, if he's off Twitter, why is he off everywhere else? So the administration as a whole, the cultural left has shifted completely in form of censorship. The only exception is if you want to talk to 5-year-olds about sex in Florida, apparently then you can't be against that, or else
then free speech becomes absolutely absolute.
Yeah, that's it. But there's definitely a shared interest there.
And I talk a lot on this program about those things that you're mentioning, and the way I refer to it is outsourcing of censorship.
You're right.
And that's a real problem. And we brought a case on behalf of DC Drano, which was heard in California by the brother of Justice Breyer, who's a senior district judge there. And we demonstrated, based on very, very well documented evidence, which tends, usually when you're filing a lawsuit, you don't have to, and you probably shouldn't put a lot of evidence into the complaint. But this was a case where we thought it would be a good idea to demonstrate that we weren't just making this up, that the state of California had set up this election security commissariat, and they would basically tell Twitter who was a problem. And it had nothing to do with election security. It had to do with wrongthink. And those people would then get strikes and then banned.
Yeah. Well,
and the judge's ruling was it was speculative. We've appealed to the Ninth Circuit, but wow, speculative. I mean,
well, the whole fact checking racket it's left-wing activism and damage control under the guise of fact checking, where so just to give us an overview, like if you run a Facebook page and you got 1 million fans, there is some algorithm that determines what percentage of your audience will actually see your post. So let's just say it's 10%. So you post something, 100,000 of your fans will see it. If you get flagged or dinged with a fact check, they will reduce that percentage. And then, after a few of those, no one is seeing your posts, and they'll preemptively fact check things that are anyway negative to Democrats. So there was one the USA Today did where it was that story about Biden checking his watch during the transfer of the 13 soldiers we lost in Afghanistan last year. And They tried to claim like, oh no, he checked his watch after the transfer. So then, of course, anyone who posted the story, including us, got flagged for posting that. Well, turns out the family spoke out. He didn't only check his watch once during the transfer. It was something like 12 or 13 times. Every single time there was a body, he checked his watch. So the fact checker was wrong about the timing and the magnitude by a factor of 12 or 13. Yet their original fact check still hit us. So there's no real accountability, and they all play the victim too. They all do the whole, oh my God, I'm being attacked for trying to uncover the truth. But we all know what they're really doing. And I actually have a whole series on PolitiFact. I probably have 10. Actually, maybe as much as 20 articles, just fact-checking fact checkers. And the stuff they get wrong, it's not in the realm of, well, maybe they don't know any better. This is just so blatantly obvious you had to have ignored it.
All right. So look, here's the thing with you, Matt. You seem to, you're one of these guys that I run across, I think I have a very large percentage of people who I interview are closer to my age than to your age. And I'm very proud of that, because I have to be careful not to only interview cool young things like you, even though there's a good demographic reason to do so, right, Jeremy? But you have one of those careers, sort of like Ash Show, who like you represent a type. What are you, around 30?
28, yeah.
Okay. People who have been immersed in the social media world and the conservative activist world, and you're everywhere. And so before we talk about the book, can you give me and the audience a sense of how you got this cool job of working for Dan Bongino, and how you got how you turn person, because a lot of people want to grow up. 10 years ago, I used to get emails that people wanted to grow up to be me. I'm not getting them anymore. They want to, of course, because they figure I'm pretty much someone. said that I looked like I was about 80 last night.
Brutal.
Now,
I
now
disagree.
I have not looked a day over 60 since I was 30. Tell me, but I do think a lot of people want to grow up to be folks like you and Ash. How does it happen? How did it happen for you?
Right. So I've been interested in politics since I was maybe 15 or 16. When I was 16, I wrote for or there's this event our high school history teacher forced us all to compete in, which was for the better, called National History Day, where I had to write my first 10-page essay of my life, which was a very big deal at age 15.
Where'd you go to high school?
Westmore Central High School in Chester, New Jersey. And actually, it's funny. One of the people that graduated above me works for Fox News for Cavuto right now. Carly Shimkus went to my high school, so we had a lot of Fox people there. But I wrote this essay for that contest on gun control. It was more of a historical essay and just what the founders were saying. And I had some of the stats aspect in there of arguing against gun control. But, I was kind of proud of my paper. And I just sort of wanted to develop it even beyond the class, and ended up turning into what became the first chapter of a book I published when I was 19. But I just sort of use that as a jumping off point to go, hey, I could, in 10,000 words, really analyze the topic. Why don't I pick a bunch of others that I'm interested in and, make it sort of a learning experience for myself, but also have it backed up in a book. So
So when did you graduated high school?
In 2012, when I was,
2012. 18. So I had already been on Twitter for 3 years.
Brutal.
When you graduated high school, which means that Twitter was already in full bloom. And this was well before the censorship days. So you were growing up already in the social media era.
Yeah,
Facebook is already old hat.
I don't think I joined Twitter until maybe like 2014 or 15. That's where I got active on it. I mean, it's weird, but it's like the seventh layer of hell, but it's also a great site. So I'm kind of weighing those two things.
You're exactly right. And I'm getting a lot of, not a lot, but someone like me who's so desperate to be loved. So anytime I get, non Antifa, when people are disappointed in me, let's put it that way. And some people saying, because I'm oddly enough, I'm being rolled out as an early super follower.
I saw that in your
accepting, and grifter. I'm telling you what you get. I'm asking if you want to pay $5 a month to get it, you can have it. I'm not selling snake oil, but what is this? Some people have said, well, why would you want to support Twitter? Why would you? And this morning I thought to myself, Twitter has been so awful. And, I'm beginning to think that Jack Dorsey's exit was the best thing, because things have gotten a little bit more normal there, I think.
You think so? I just don't trust the new guy either, but I mean,
you might not,
neither of them are really great, obviously. Yeah.
I think I'm seeing a lot less heavy-handed banning and shadow banning, frankly. But and the fact that I'm an early shadow super follower guy, that they know who I am.
Right. Yeah, you sell it there.
So where would I be? I mean, it's been extremely important for my career. A very large percentage of my work now is related to this my social media presence.
One of the things I found about it that it's the most useful, and I guess I'll go back to my origin story in a bit, is just you see how the sausage is made in real time. Like, you'll see how a talking point evolves. So a week ago it was, well, gas prices are so high because these corporations are just all of a sudden in the fourth quarter of 2021 decided, let's be greedy. We apparently never before in history were they ever greedy. So and then within a week, and someone actually did a back-to-back. It was from some far left page where they were blaming it on what I just mentioned, and then saying, like, don't blame it on Ukraine because it has to do with corporate greed. And literally the next day, we're all going to make sacrifices to beat Putin, and if banning Russian oil makes it more expensive, that's worth the cost. Yeah. So within a week, they've had two different explanations as opposed to just we need to drill more oil. And the Biden administration obviously acknowledges this because they need more oil produced. So they're asking other countries to do it so they can save face and not break their campaign promise of having us be the one who does it. But they realize what the solution is. So it's their, I don't know. And it's funny too, how many people can't see that happening. Like, for instance, with the Don't Say Gay bill, the first thing I ever heard about it was there's a bill called the Don't Say Gay bill. And my first reaction was, no, it's not. And I just clicked out of it. I didn't read a single word, didn't read what they said. I just went, no, that's not true. Click. And then guess what? It's not true. So you just kind of learn like what's BS intuitively and what's not.
So there you are, though, before things got quite so black and white and quite so vicious and quite so obvious. And how'd you sell the book? I mean,
so no one really read it is the thing. I think maybe 500 copies. I think maybe 500 copies that got sold, but like 350 of those or 400 where I just made it free at one point on Amazon because I wanted someone to read it. Fortunately, Dan Bongino ended up reading it. So about a year after I got the book came out in 2013, I was 19 at the time. About a year later, I was working for a publication called Rare. I was, I think, a sophomore in college. Jack Hunter was running it at the time, who worked for Rand Paul. He hired me. And I wrote just a movie review of something Robert Reich did. It was a documentary he did. It was terrible. So I just, was sitting there watching it and just typing up rebuttals kind of line by line as he was saying. And
all the camera angles like up, tilting upward.
Me?
No, Robert Reich shot the movie.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, he was great in The Hobbit. Yeah, that went way over my head. It would have went over his head as well. So anyway, I wrote that rebuttal to him. Dan loved it and ended up sort of following me after that. I think he had maybe 2,000 Twitter followers at the time. And then I noticed he had the check mark. So I'm like, well, this guy's got to be important. He's got a check mark. And we kind of hit it off from there. He started inviting me like on radio shows he was going on. We ended up becoming friends. And at the time I was studying finance in college. And I actually didn't really think politics would be a career. Just because like when you're starting out writing, getting like $50 an article, like to scale that seems impossible. And obviously it's not what I'm doing now. But when you're starting out, it seems that way.
So you've been with Dan for quite some time then.
So I've known him for
in your life, in what counts. In my life,
yeah, I've known him for I think 8 or 9 years. I've been working for him full time for about 3 or so. But then I ended up getting a job in the finance industry for like 8 weeks, and just decided this totally sucks. So Dan, this was maybe 3 years before I worked for Dan. So I was just kind of emailing random people to hire me that were in politics, and Alan West was the only person who got back to me. Really? He hired me as a writer. And he paid for me based on the revenue I would generate, and turns out I was capable of generating quite a bit. So I ended up doing that full time for about 2 years. After the 2016 election, Facebook just throttled the page out of existence, so I couldn't really make money at it. So then I was I don't know, sort of just writing in the background and more or less, I don't know, like not doing nothing, but just, wasn't that productive, was just sort of looking for work. Ended up just taking like an odd job at a bank just to kind of kill time during the day because I didn't know what else to do. And then as I'm there bored out of my mind, Dan just calls me and goes, hey, I'm going to start up a site called Junior Report and you're going to run it. And I was like, yeah, sounds good. And it kind of went from there. And, that's 3 years have been that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty easy life.
Yeah, I mean, except the brief period of unemployment, pretty easy. I mean,
and now you're set for life, I assume, right? You make $1 million a day.
Not quite a day, but it pays. I can't complain or anything. Yeah, I know it's pretty much a dream job. I mean, the work pays. Listen, I work very hard, but he compensates me accordingly, so I can't complain at all. And
where's he located?
He's in Florida, so I'm. The whole team is basically remote except his wife, I think.
I met Dan briefly at the social media summit. Where our hearts were just another heartbreaking opportunity for us to see a little bit of light from Donald Trump, and then nothing.
Yeah, I'm not even seeing my Truth Social anymore. Like, what the heck's the deal with that? I saw you were just posting about it too.
Well, it's so funny. What happened was I actually just I'm not trying not to do it every single day, but I'm having some fun with the fact that they have been so incompetent. I mean, I was actually saying for a long time, I'm not a Trump cultist. I do think that he, in many respects, was the man for the hour, and that his accomplishments are significant, and there's also lots of disappointment, but you've read my tweets. But I wasn't going to run to get onto Truth Social because it struck me as like the Trump club. But on the other hand, all my friends are going to be there. And, if you're posting already at Getter and you're already posting at Twitter, so fine, I'll cut and paste it. And but I would not have stayed up. I don't stay up. When I was going out with my wife, she asked me, we were talking about coffee, and she told me, I didn't drink coffee at the time. I don't really drink much of it anymore. Anyway, she's a big coffee drinker. And I mentioned to her that I don't drink coffee. And she said, well, how do you stay up? How'd you get through college and law school? So I went to sleep. That's why she got into Stanford Law School and I didn't. You know? But I happened to have been up because I was traveling. I went down to Miami and I saw my mom, and I got to her place in Boynton Beach late, and I just happened to be poking her. I didn't even know when the rollout was, and then I saw, oh my gosh, everyone's running over to Truth. So fine, I'll put in my application. Why would someone like me be given a preview? After all, I'm nothing. Fine, and I thought, I registered within the first hour. This is cool. That was 3.5 weeks ago. And until just about 5 minutes ago, just before we went, I started recording, went on the air. Just before we started recording, I did a series of screenshots of getting notifications from Truth Social over that screen that says your here's your wait list number.
That's about 100,000 and change.
That's not 100,000 and change because I don't have. Oh, right. You're right. My wait list is 100,000. Is like 100,000, which has been the same. That's a heck of a wait list. Okay, where it doesn't ever change.
Yeah, it's not great. I don't know any behind the scenes. It seems like they just kind of wanted to get it out on President's Day for like the symbolic nature of it before it was really fully built. I mean, I got one of the beta ones for Bongino Report. It's basically a Twitter clone. The engagement's a lot better. My only thing I haven't liked about sites like that or Parler and Getter is, as insane as the left is, like, they're kind of what makes Twitter fun.
Yes, that's right. Who wants to? That's why
when someone
Parler, with all due respect to Dan, Parler never did it for me. I just want to show you. I did a screen, 4 pictures of getting notifications of people following. This is how good I am at social media. I don't even have to post. I don't even have to have a profile for people to follow me. So I did this really meaning to just for humor. Well, right before we went on, I got this. Your wait is over. Someone ran. Nice. Someone was. Believe me, it was not a coincidence. Someone pays it. There's a guy who has like 175,000 followers and who is kind of MAGA and he's kind of embarrassing us. Can someone just pull the hair out of the drain, under his name? And
well, I'll go follow you after this. So
yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah.
So all right, so you're like one of the kids of this time of like you're really just, and you're with Dan, and this is just so cool. And then you get to write, but now you're writing books that people are buying, even if they don't get reviewed.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the New York Times stumped me from the bestseller list. Like I sold like 3 or 4 times the amount you need to get on there, and they just completely ignored me, which I'm actually proud of. So I'm not really complaining, but I should tell my publisher. He probably would game if instead of like a New York Times bestseller, we could have like snubbed by the New York Times bestseller list or something on the cover.
That's true. You should, someone who really understands this should make some kind of index of sales versus weeks snubbed by the New York Times. Like some
that would be good. The snubbed index
magic number. Yeah. That would of course be an honor. So now, let's talk about the book, about the most recent book.
Sure.
George Soros. Everyone listening to this understands that he's the guy. He's brilliant.
Oh, he's really smart. I actually had to read a lot of his financial writings, which weren't really that useful for the book. I just kind of wanted to know everything this guy thinks, though, and it was a lot of stuff. Like I was like, I wish I read this in college just for the perspective, not like I agree with it, but just for the alternate view of kind of the conventional wisdom I was learning at the time. So the book's divided into a lot of different sections. I mean, the beginning is just an origin story of who this guy is, where he came from, his kind of early ventures and philosophy. Then I just sort of take through as in his history of influence in U.S. politics, which is mainly through presidential elections, that chapter. And then I dive into local politics is a whole separate chapter where I just sort of list by state, here are all the kooks he's funding for district and Commonwealth attorney races, what their philosophy is, what he gives them, what happens. And it's only repetitive in the format, but each one is, insane in their own unique way. And then just a lot of just random stuff. Like I have a whole chapter on just leaked documents from Soros-backed organizations, and when they tell us, influence in Europe and all, really just across the world. And I just kind of want to give a whole comprehensive overview of this guy and what he's all about.
So you probably are in a good position to answer this question. How much of the social of the tactics come from him? Or does he have a brain trust to come up with these? For example, I thought that this district attorney idea, it is true evil genius. It was true evil genius because you could say confidently 5 years ago that notwithstanding the swing back and forth in Washington, conservatives were owning statewide elections, owning state houses. It was like little, and there was the sense that little by little, this was how we were going to consolidate, taking the country back from, and then this idea that, well, why should we be limited by things like laws or enforcing them? How can we get away from that? And then going for district attorneys and, and state, what is it?
Commonwealth
attorneys general. Yeah. Brilliant. So is that something that would have sprung from his brow, or is he removed and he basically writes a big check? That's what
I would say in this case, I would assume so, in that like in a lot of things he's funding, like he'll give to an organization that pushes a certain ideology. These are all just him individually backing each candidate as opposed to funding a group that's funding them. So I would say, yeah, it's his idea. And the brilliance of it too is, as you said, it circumnavigates the law, in that, you don't need to go through a legislature or a governor to get what you want done. If you don't want bail, you back a DA who's not going to support bail. If you want lesser sentences for different crimes, you find someone who's not going to enforce them or have lower conviction rates. So it's allowed him to sort of circumnavigate all of that.
But what he might not have counted. I mean, maybe by now he knows the spinelessness of who his opposition is.
Yeah.
If you're a governor or you're even in a legislature in a state or a municipality or a city where someone becomes the chief law enforcement officer of your subdivision or your state and says, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to enforce the following laws that are on the books anymore. You have, in my opinion, an obligation as the governor, or whatever the case may be, to say, well, no. That's not prosecutorial discretion. You can't, an attorney general of a state does not have veto power. Or a district attorney of a city does not have veto power over what legislatures decide shall and shall not be. And I remember this issue first, a related issue first became coherent in my head when, during the same-sex marriage appeal in the Supreme Court, the Obama administration said, well, we're not going to defend this law of the that was passed by the Congress of the United States. And nobody had a problem with that. Now I can see where there should be some wiggle room there. It's a little bit different, but that's my observation. I'm not sure that opens up. I mean, the thing is, you have a fertile mind, so I'm sure you have something that you can say in response to what I just said, but could he possibly have imagined that there would be no pushback from the establishment, that someone wouldn't say, oh, no, that's not your department to decide what gets prosecuted or not?
Right. Well, the thing is, he's sort of strategically picked a lot. Like most of them are in states with blue governors, so he's sort of lucked out in that a lot of them share the same ideology. Now there are obviously exceptions to the rule. Like I think Missouri, God, I hope I'm not getting this wrong. I think I should actually just look it up in front of a computer. Is Missouri's governor Republican? Let's see. Yes. All right. So that's one exception to the rule. But Kim Gardner is the one from there who I think it was Kim Gardner's from Missouri, the one who went after the McCloskeys, is a Soros-backed DA. Actually, and one of the points I make in the book is, even 5 years ago, like, it would be sort of weird to think that local, like, most people don't know who the representative is, and like for a DA to be a household name is sort of unheard of even 5 years ago. But now there's like Kim Gardner, we have Chase Abudin, with Krasner and PA, George Gascon, and just this whole list of people who, many of them sort of, and there's this weird perception a lot of people have, specifically young people, that the reason everyone's in jail is because they got caught with like a doobie at a party one time, and it's just not true. But they'll focus on, hey, we're against all these low level offenses, and hey, you don't want to put someone in jail for that, or we're all about giving people second chances and rehabilitation. But that all sounds great in theory, but when it actually goes into practice, it's wait all of a second, this guy just murdered someone and he somehow got bail. That's less than what Kyle Rittenhouse got for defending himself. So, and there's countless examples, like in New York, which this is separate from the Soros-backed stuff, but they did a bail reform law that was supposed to, I think, like 80 or 90% of laws or of nonviolent crimes were not going to require bail. And you could say, again, in theory, that sounds good, but sorry, not even in theory, it doesn't sound good. There's plenty of crimes. Like if I defrauded someone out of $1 million, it's non-violent, but I should go to jail. But the logistics.
When you were a very young child, if that, this might have been during the Giuliani mayoralty in New York, when the broken window.
Yeah, I had a whole actually a separate book on that covers all of that.
And they said
the thing is, it works. And
fair jumpers are usually not just fair jumpers.
Correct. Well, the thing is, they'll use logic like this. They'll say, like, okay, a fair jumper, it costs you $3 to their cost to society is $3. And hey, if you put him in jail, it's going to cost us $1,000 a week. So where's the cost benefit? And you go, okay, but that's for one person. If you don't enforce the law, then everyone does it. And in which, there's a
that
deterrent.
Is such a stupid argument.
Correct. And it's been made a lot of times, but they're ignoring the deterrent effect. And as I was saying about the whole bail reform, there's also the logistical component of, we have a team of bureaucrats who have these far left opinions, and we have to trust their judgment in categorizing all these tens of thousands of different types of possible crimes into different categories, and they can't do that correctly. So when they roll out bail reform, or the lack of bail, really, being an accessory to murder was initially classified as a nonviolent crime, because technically speaking, if you're a getaway driver or something, you might not have pulled the trigger. So there was all these absurdities like that. I mean, fortunately they got patched, but it just shows you how poorly thought out a lot of these laws are, and it's magnified by quite a bit.
Believe it or not, I don't know if you're having as much fun as I am, but we've chewed up 40 minutes.
Damn.
Which is usually when we start getting people, calling their moms
out
to pick them up. So I want to just come back briefly, since you do have the book, and I like to help people sell their books. Big picture.
Yes.
George Soros. The man is a refugee from totalitarianism. He is not a fool. Moreover, he seems to act, notwithstanding the things that people say. I believe he is an evil man, but I don't believe he is, who is it again? From Dr. He's not Dr. Evil, right? He's not going around saying, what evil thing can I do today? I am sure that he believes that he is on the side of the angels. My question is, have you ever seen anything in the stuff that people have quoted him saying, or anything that he's written that suggests that he is aware of the contradictions of what his conscience tells him to do, and what the outcomes of his spending or the causes that he supports result in?
Well, the thing that Soros actually is normally I am very charitable in sort of ascribing people's motives. Like if you're, some boomer liberal and your profile picture is a cat and you think Trump is evil, like I legitimately think, whatever, you watch Stephen Colbert, it's what you've been told, you don't know any better. These people are all my neighbors. We all get along, they're kooks, but whatever, they think they're doing the right thing. Soros, I disagree with that, and that it's very easy to see the consequences of his politics. And like with a lot of the law, the criminal justice reform stuff, there's just no real logic, when you get beyond any sort of stage one thinking, for any of it to make sense. And even if you did think it makes sense, we have, I mean, in most of these cities, the murder rate has doubled in 2020 and it continued to increase in 2021. So, we have a controlled experiment. It didn't work.
So is he like a hardcore Bolshevik? Is that what it is? Because those people are the ones who never learn, that's what it really is, isn't it?
It's either that or it's, sort of like to make a Thomas Sowell type argument. They just have this sort of vision of how things ought to be. And that vision itself is more important than actual reality. As for how Soros thinks, I mean, one part of the book that a lot of liberals have tried to claim is out of context was this interview he did with 60 Minutes back in 1995, where he's, I think you know what I'm going on about. Actually, probably everyone watching this has seen it, where he's talking about, being a Jew in Hungary and
the happiest time of my life.
And the Nazis would recruit Jews from the local population who, most of them were under this false impression they might be spared. They obviously were not, but to help, serve deportation notices, confiscate people's goods. And Soros took a job as one of them, and in the interview was talking about it, and the host, Steve Croft was the host, but was trying to sort of give him some wiggle room and be like, but surely you feel bad about it and you had to do it. And he was kind of like, oh no, like I enjoyed it, and if I didn't do it, someone else would have done it, so I don't feel bad. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, but that was the attitude. So that was,
I think he said it was the happiest time of his life. I mean, that's what I recall.
I don't know that exact quote, but he was completely unfazed by it at all, not disturbed. And that's one of the very few things, and I actually have a lot of quotes in the book where Soros describes himself as an egomaniac and a narcissist and all that, which is, at least he admits it. But this is one of those things that it's one of the few things he tried to walk back, because I think he realized how explosive that was. And of course, all the media that's largely funded by him does the whole, oh yeah, it's out of context and you're anti-Semitic for questioning it. So in the course of my research, I found that Soros' own father wrote an autobiography. So of course I buy the book. Talks about that exact incident, and this is years before that 60 Minutes interview, actually probably decades before it, and describes it more or less in an identical sense of the 60 Minutes interview. It was totally in context, said his son seemed to enjoy the job, and he tried to dissuade him from it. So, wow. Not exactly a good guy, seems to find purpose in the weirdest things, or the most sinister things.
Do you think he's gonna, is there anything that can stop him?
I mean, I guess death, but time. I mean, he's 91 years old, so I think, it's gonna, I don't know how to say this charitably. He's gonna pass away, basically.
All right, but his money won't, right? And he has set things up.
Yeah, that's sort of the last section of the book, is just what's next. And Soros claims, he was worried about his organization, or he cites other organizations where their missions kind of strayed from their founder after their founder died. But so claims he was initially worried about that, but his sons are going to be in charge of it. So that's sort of changed his mind. And the amount of money he's donated to his foundation in just the past 5 years is pretty much comparable to what he spent on politics in the past 40 or so years. So the amount that they're going to have going forward is more than they've spent, basically.
Well, I hope we find out soon if he's right.
Find out. That's a good way of putting it.
Because we have an expression in the Jewish tradition, yesh din v'yesh dayan. There is justice and there is a judge, and he is gonna have some explaining to do. And it is, I suppose, our only defense is to just fight back on the merits and plug the holes. People with private money. We do. I think you and I probably both support the idea that people should be able to do with their money more or less what they want to. Should it include subversion of society? I mean, there are some countries that have. How many countries have declared him persona non grata?
Kazakhstan, I think Indonesia, China, Russia. I mean, unfortunately, they're not the countries we necessarily like, but on that one thing, they did the right thing. But yes, I have a list of those as well, but I think I got them all. But
that's it. This is ridiculous. It's 50 minutes. We're pushing 50 minutes, and we're having a lot of fun. And maybe we'll have lunch sometime when it gets nice.
Yeah.
Meet you in Livingston, perhaps. That's where the kosher restaurants are. And thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, buy the book.
I agree.
I know that you all have a problem with paying $5 a month to get hear me talk about my toe operation. Why you would have that problem, I don't know, but it's definitely worth a book worth having, even if you don't get it for free as I did. And thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So long.